Greetings, friends. My name's Sam Spoor. Today we're going to take a walk in the woods. We're going to look at some edible mushrooms and we'll look at some poisonous mushrooms as well. First, before we take a foray out into the woods, it would be a good idea to talk about equipment, gear that you will need in order to pick mushrooms. First of all, you will need to have a nice wicker basket, as you can see sitting on the table here. Inside that basket, you will want to have a knife. Today, I have two knives. This is a Swiss Army knife. It's about 3 inches long. Now, you can open up the blade, which is about 2.5 inches long. That's very good for cutting mushrooms. I also have an old-timer's knife. This was my father's. And that is also good for cutting mushrooms. Now, in addition, this Swiss Army knife also has a pair of scissors. It has a pair of tweezers. These are all good implements to have when picking mushrooms. Now, one thing the scissors come in handy for is this. One of the best media in which to package your mushrooms is wax paper. And so using scissors or using a knife, you can cut a square of wax paper and that's where you put your samples. You can put 2 or 3 samples in here depending on the size of the mushroom you pick. People often like to pre-cut maybe 10 different squares when they go out. Another item that is a very good idea to have in your basket are a couple of paper bags. Now, when you pick your samples and you wrap them in wax paper, sometimes they may be delicate. You don't want to have them damaged because you might want to investigate them further. You can wrap them in your wax paper and then stuff them in the bag, and the bag will give them further protection. Next item that's often very good to have is a hand lens. This little Tasco lens here, it's not the best in the world, but it's inexpensive, and it has 3 different magnifications. Now, when you first go out, you might not find this so useful, but as you get to know mushrooms, you will find a very interesting world in the spore-bearing surface, the gills or the tubes or the teeth, which we'll talk about later, or the scales on top of the cap, various different things, and sometimes you might even find some interesting little creatures crawling around on the mushrooms. Okay, lastly for the basket, and we'll talk about this later in references, a good hand manual. This is Orson Miller's Mushrooms of North America. I've used this book for probably 30 years now. It's a very, very good reference. There's a few others we'll talk about later. And if you want to take notes, have a pad and a pen. Now, let me place all this back in the basket. And by the way, I didn't do it today, but having a string to wrap the hand lens around your neck is very useful so you don't have to dig for it. Now, when you're going out into the woods, it's a good idea to have a pair of boots, long pants, and a long sleeve shirt, and a hat. Now, there's 2 main reasons for this: poison ivy and ticks. And with that, I believe we're ready to take our foray into the woods.